Hey guys. So today I was going to do a true crime video, but I'm pushing that back to next week because I realized that today's video would be uploaded on 9/11. I decided to go over a few select out of the thousands of victims from that day that have sort of always stood out to me. Of all the horrific things that happened that day, this is something that I could go on and on about for hours, to be honest. But I thought I would just do 2 or 3 different stories of people that lost their lives on that day and sort of became iconic in certain ways. A lot like the falling man, who is probably the most famous photograph victim from that day. These victims stood out to me because of certain images or phone calls that were made. And all of this information that I'm telling you can be found online, but I warn you, it is very disturbing. If you're interested in seeing basically their last moments, sadly they are documented, as were a lot of deaths that day, but these were some that just sort of always stood out to me. The first one is Edna Cintron. Now this is a lot like the falling man, and a lot like a lot of the images we see from 9/11. Cannot 100% be confirmed that this is the person. However, these are confirmed as much as they can be by family members of the victims, who believe that these were their loved ones. So Edna Cintron, being the first, was an employee for Marsh and McLennan, which were offices located between the 93rd floor and the 100th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And this is within the 6th floor impact that the plane that hit the North Tower covered. Now, almost everyone who was on these floors would have been killed instantly, but the woman in this very famous picture, who is believed to be Edna, survived. How she survived is unknown. Maybe she was on one of the higher up floors and managed to get down to the impact site. Maybe she was just in a very lucky spot in the building where she didn't get hit or the heat didn't overcome her. This picture is also very controversial because it sort of adds to the theory that the buildings exploded from within rather than planes hitting them, because Edna is shown at the impact site, but there's the whole debate of whether it would have been hot enough to melt steel beams, all that. We all know those stories. But she is standing in basically a big gaping hole where the plane originally hit. So you could argue that a lot of wind is coming in, and that's a very cool spot right there, probably high up on a September day. So floors 93 through 99 were hit, and this woman is seen standing in the gaping hole where the plane went through. Some people have speculated it is the 93rd floor she's standing on. Some people have speculated it was the 97th. But to me, it looks closer to the 93rd if it was she's low down in the picture. Now, Edna is seen in these photographs, and there's also video standing in the hole, sort of leaning against hanging on to sort of one of the window pillars and waving a little bit, in hopes, I'm sure, of getting a helicopter or someone to see her and be able to rescue her. Now, unfortunately, everyone from the floors of 92 and up died that day, either from smoke inhalation, from the heat, from the original blast of the plane, from jumping or falling out of the building, or from the final collapse. Now, Edna's husband supposedly had confirmed that he believed this was his wife, Edna. However, there are still some doubters as to whether this was her, supposedly because he's done a lot of interviews about her death without mentioning this photograph of her. Another controversial thing about this picture is that a lot of people originally argued whether it was actually Edna Cintron and not a woman named Karen Juday. Now, Edna and Karen do look a lot alike, especially from the distance that we see the woman in the photo. It would be nearly impossible to decipher which of the two it was. However, over the years, it seems to be that Karen Juday's fiance, who supposedly originally claimed that he believed this could have been Karen and not Edna, he has found a lot of proof that she was elsewhere that day. So I personally am under the impression that it is Edna Cintron, but we'll never know for sure. Now, Karen Juday, I'll go into that a little bit. Her fiance, Richard Pecorella, was searching all over the internet, all through the archives, desperately trying to find some sign of his fiance. He stated, "I need to know how she died. Did she burn? Did she jump? Did she suffer?" Now, Pecorella says, Also, I would have hoped she jumped rather than burn. Because of this and because of photos that he has found that he believes to have been Karen jumping, she has sort of become a representative of the many jumpers that day. And her fiance often tries to use her experience and her death as a way of saying it's okay. You know, it's okay if your family member jumped, as there is a lot of religious controversy over if they jumped, would that be considered committing suicide? And if so, would they go to hell? So sadly, that's a lot that people have had to deal with on top of this tragedy. Certain people have had to deal with the thought that maybe their loved ones were damned because of something that they may have had no other choice but to do. People who argue that those who jumped would be damned for that, I think are forgetting how hot it got in those buildings. I think that your human instinct would fully kick in just to get away from the heat rather than willingly stand there and be burned, sadly. And as messed up as it is to even think about. That's what they had to go through that day. So of course a lot of them probably had to jump. I know I saw a video of one guy who I don't know that he's ever been identified, but he was trying desperately to sort of walk or balance his way down between pillars outside the windows, and he slipped. So even those that did jump, it's not really certain whether they did it out of a choice, out of necessity, or if it happened by accident. But Karen has sort of become an icon for those who did, and sort of a beacon to say that it's okay. You know, she did what she had to do that day. Now, Pecorella believes that she was one of the jumpers because of a photograph prior to this person falling. There is a group of a bunch of people hanging outside of the windows on one side of the North Tower. Now, she was supposedly wearing something very similar to Edna Cintron, which is why people assumed that maybe it was Karen. However, the separating thing between the two of their clothing is that Karen supposedly was wearing a blue bandana, which she wore, from what I could read, practically every day to hold her hair back. And Edna did not have any bandana on, and the woman in the window standing did not have a bandana on. However, the woman that was hanging out of the window with all the other group of people that you see, this woman is wearing a blue bandana. Now, there is a picture of supposedly that same woman falling, but her bandana is gone. So it could have, you know, come off prior to her climbing out the window, falling out the window, whatever happened. It could have fallen off during the fall. Or there is also still the possibility that maybe it wasn't her. Her fiance, Richard Pecorella, says that he believes, he is 90% sure that the woman in that side of the window with the other group of people and the woman falling is his fiance, Karen. Now, the last person I want to speak about today is one of the most traumatizing and just horrifying things that I have ever heard from that day. I remember the first time I heard this, I was like shaking and crying because it was just so scary to think that we can hear this moment happening. But this is about the death of Kevin Cosgrove in the World Trade Center. Now, Cosgrove was a vice president of claims for Aon Corporation and a fire warden for the company. Now, at the time of his death, he was located in the northwest corner of the 105th floor of the South Tower, overlooking the World Financial Center, when he called 911 at 9:54 a.m. He told dispatchers that he was calling from Jonathan Osterud's office. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that last name. And he had two other individuals there with him. One he mentioned by name as Doug Cherry. He told the operator on the phone, "My wife thinks I'm all right. I called and said I was leaving the building and that I was fine, and then bang," he states, referring to the plane hitting the South Tower. Now, the last part of this call is the part that really stuck in my mind for years. And again, this part is available. It's on YouTube. And it is very traumatizing to listen to, so I warn you, if you go and look for it, to be prepared, because it is just awful to be witness to, basically. Now, during the end of the call, he's talking about how there is smoke everywhere, they're hanging out of two broken windows, you know, they're trying to wave stuff and get attention to the helicopters. He does sound like he's getting frustrated with the 911 dispatcher, which understandably so. Nothing to do with the dispatcher, nothing to do with him, it's the situation at hand. But he's just talking about how hot it is up there, how they can't breathe up there, all of the smoke. And then you start to hear a rumbling noise on the phone line, and you hear him yelling, "Oh God, oh," and the phone cuts out. and that is the moment that the South Tower collapsed. So that moment is recorded from within the World Trade Center by this phone call. So like I said, I could go on for hours about the victims of 9/11, as there are thousands, but I just wanted to sort of touch on those stories that have stuck out to me for years. But if this is interesting to you guys, if you guys know of a victim you'd like to know maybe more on, I'm more than happy to do research on that and maybe do a video, as the 9/11 attacks have always sort of stuck in my head, and the victims of that day have always had a special place in my heart. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. I'm sorry if this is a little bit of a downer, but today is a little bit of a downer for anybody who witnessed what happened that day, really. Please feel free to share below in the comments where you were on that day, what you remember about it. I find those stories very interesting, as any of us who lived through it, we all know where we were that day and how we found out. So leave those in the comments below, because I really like reading those and noticing the details that people remember. I feel like a lot of really minute details stand out to people, maybe what they were drinking at that moment, or you know, something very insignificant always sort of stands out to everybody in that day, just because it was such an out-of-body experience, and this is the one thing you remember doing that was normal and then suddenly was completely changed. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button below. If you have any suggestions for videos you would like to see, true crime or otherwise, please leave those in the comments below. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I upload new videos every Wednesday. And other than that, I will see you guys next week. Bye.